I pushed open the door to my bedroom and froze. Frozen on the threshold that, until yesterday, was the entrance to my sanctuary. Two men in paint-splattered overalls were covering my warm, peach-colored walls with thick, heavy brushes of sterile white paint. My floral curtains, the ones I had sewn myself, lay in a heap on the floor like a fallen bird. My dresser, a dark cherry wood piece I'd rescued from a garage sale and restored with my own two hands, had been shoved to the middle of the room. Atop its polished surface, cans of dripping paint sat, threatening the wood I had spent weeks sanding and lacquering. Kevin, my 35-year-old son, was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, a smug grin on his face as if he'd just told the funniest joke in the world. Beside him, Jessica, my daughter-in-law, was scrolling on her phone with that conceited expression she got when she felt she'd won a battle no one else knew they were fighting. The air crackled with tension when they saw me. The younger painter glanced at me with an uncomfortable look, as if I'd interrupted something private, something I had no right to see. The smell of fresh paint made me dizzy, mixing with the rage that was beginning to boil in my chest. What is the meaning of this? My voice came out weaker than I wanted, a shaky whisper. I had just gotten home after a 12-hour shift at the processing plant, a place where I'd spent the last 20 years of my life on my feet, packing frozen foods on an assembly line. My feet ached inside my worn-out sneakers. My fingers were numb from the cold, and my back protested from the hours of repetitive motion. But none of that mattered now. This invasion of my most personal space eclipsed any physical pain. Jessica looked up from her phone and gave me that sickeningly sweet, fake smile she used when she wanted something. "Oh, Eleanor, you're home," she said with a casual tone, as if commenting on the weather. "We're just making a few changes before we get properly settled in." Kevin straightened up and walked toward me with a confidence that had always unnerved me, the confidence of a man who had never truly paid for his mistakes. "Mom, we wanted to surprise you. You know, this room is way too big for just you, and we need more space. The kids are growing, and our apartment is just bursting at the seams." My legs started to tremble. 20 years working in that freezing factory, saving every single dollar I could, putting away my small overtime bonuses, taking on extra cleaning jobs on the weekends. 20 years breathing in the smell of processed food, enduring the shouts of line supervisors, scrubbing my hands raw at the end of each day. All to have a place that was mine, a roof over my head where I could rest without asking anyone for permission. The older painter, a man with deeply lined face, cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Ma'am, if there's a problem, we can stop and come back tomorrow." No, keep going," Jessica said, waving her hand dismissively as if she owned the place. "We've already paid for the job. Might as well get it finished today." Paid with what money, I asked myself, though I already knew the answer. The money I had loaned them last month when Kevin lost his job at the car dealership. The money I had taken from my savings because my daughter-in-law had begged me, with crocodile tears in her eyes, to help them with their rent. Kevin moved closer and put his hand on my shoulder. The touch, once comforting, now felt like a brand and ownership. "Mom, don't be like this. It's just paint. Besides, we've already talked to a contractor friend of mine. We can divide the house into 2 parts. You'll have your space, and we'll have ours. Like one big happy family."
One big happy family. The words sounded hollow, like an echo in an empty room. I looked at my crumpled curtains on the floor, the ones I had sewn myself with fabric I bought at a discount store after 3 weeks of saving my tips from the diner where I used to waitress on weekends. I looked at the growing stain of white paint on my dresser, the one I found at a flea market for $20 and had lovingly brought back to life over 2 whole weekends. "And who decided this?" I asked, my voice finally finding some of its strength, its edge. When did you two sit down and plan the future of my house without consulting me?" Jessica sighed dramatically and put her phone away. "Eleanor, don't be so dramatic. You always get so difficult when we try to do something nice for you. Look at this ugly color you had. The white is going to look beautiful, see?" Beautiful for whom? I wanted to scream. I had chosen that warm peach color after days of comparing swatches at the hardware store. It reminded me of the sunsets I used to watch from the window of my old rented room when I dreamed of having my own walls that I could paint any color I wanted. The painters kept working, pretending not to hear our argument, but I felt their uncomfortable glances every time our voices rose. The younger one had paint splatters even in his hair, and I wondered how much they were being paid for this last-minute job, for this desecration. Kevin walked around the room like an inspector checking his property. "Mom, look, it's going to be so much brighter, and when we bring our furniture in, you'll see what a huge difference it makes. Jessica already found a beautiful bedroom set on sale." Their furniture. In my room. In the space I had filled with my own things, each with its own story, each bought with the sweat of my hands, now wrinkled and worn. Jessica walked over to the small vanity where I kept my drugstore perfumes and my creams for dry hands. "And all this clutter, we can organize it better. You don't need so many things, Eleanor. When you get older, you have to start simplifying your life." Simplify my life? As if my small treasures were trash, cluttering up their grand plans? As if my 67 years had turned me into an annoying tenant in my own house? I felt something snap inside me. It wasn't just the fresh paint covering my beloved walls or the furniture moved without my permission. It was the way they had decided my future, so casually, as if I were an old piece of furniture that had to be placed in the least visible corner. And just like that, everything began to unravel. But let me tell you how I got here, so you can understand why that afternoon, watching those strangers paint my sanctuary, I knew it was time to fight back, even if it meant losing the only family I had left. My name is Eleanor Vance, and I am 67 years old. For over 40 years, my hands have known little else than hard labor. I started at a textile mill right out of high school and ended up on the line at a food processing plant where the air is always cold and smells of cardboard and disinfectant. I clock in at 6 a.m. to sort and pack goods for shipping, and I clock out at 6 p.m. with an aching back and eyes blurry from staring at conveyor belts. My hands are marked with small scars from machinery and dry cracked from the constant washing. My nails, which I once liked to paint a simple pink, I now keep short and bare because it's more practical for the work. I was widowed 12 years ago. My Bob died of a heart attack while watching a baseball game on a Sunday afternoon. A good man, a construction worker who dedicated his life to building things for others, but never had enough left over to build a house for us. He left me with more beautiful memories than money in the bank. After his funeral, I stayed in the apartment we had rented since we were married, paying a rent that went up every year, even as the building itself fell into disrepair.
Kevin was different when he was a boy, a shy kid who would hug me when I came home, exhausted from work, and help me fold the laundry while he told me about his day at school. But something changed when he met Jessica. She swept into his life like a storm, full of big plans and expensive dreams. She talked about vacations to Florida, new SUVs and houses and gated communities. At first, I thought it was good that my son had an ambitious woman by his side. Bob had always been content with little, and I was afraid Kevin had inherited that same tranquility, which is sometimes mistaken for a lack of ambition. But I soon discovered that Jessica's dreams came with a price tag that others were expected to pay. When they got married, I lent them $2,000 for the reception, money I had saved dollar by dollar, keeping it in an old coffee can in the back of my closet. They promised to pay me back in 6 months. That was 8 years ago. When their first child was born, they asked me for another $1,000 for hospital expenses. When the second came, they needed $500 for a used crib and stroller. There was always an emergency, always a promise to pay you back on payday. I never pressed them for the money. A mother doesn't charge her son interest, I would tell myself. But deep down, I knew my generosity had become their convenience. It was easier to ask mom than to get a second job or cut back on luxuries. Working on a factory line teaches you to be tough. When the shift supervisor yells at you because the line backed up, when your feet are screaming for a break, but you still have 5 hours to go, you learn that no one is going to defend you if you don't defend yourself first. You also learn the value of $1. Every $100 bill represented hours of my life standing in one spot, performing the same motion over and over again. That's why I saved everything I could. A few dollars from my paycheck each week, the extra cash from when I worked overtime on holidays. I lived on the bare minimum. Secondhand clothes from Goodwill, simple food I cooked at home, entertainment limited to free television shows. On Sundays, my only day off, I would go to the local flea market, looking for useful and cheap things. That's where I found my cherry wood dresser for $20, the one that now had white paint stains on it. After Bob's death, loneliness was my constant companion. Kevin would visit occasionally, always with Jessica and the kids. But their visits felt more like inspections. They would check my refrigerator, comment on how small the apartment was, and suggest that it was time for me to think about moving into a senior living community. A senior living community. As if being 67 had automatically made me incapable of making my own decisions. As if working a 60-hour week was something a frail or senile person would do. Jessica had a special talent for making me feel old and out of touch. She would talk about smartphone apps I didn't understand, trendy restaurants she'd been to, important people she'd met. She always ended her stories with a condescending smile and a pat on my hand. Oh, Eleanor, what would you know about these modern things? But I knew things she didn't. I knew how to make an $1,800 a month paycheck last for 30 whole days. I knew how to get tough stains out of clothes and how to fix a running toilet with patience and ingenuity. I knew how to work 12 hours straight without complaining. And how to save money, even when it seemed impossible. For years, my dream had been to own my own home. Not something big or luxurious, just a place where I could paint the walls any color I wanted, where I could plant flowers in a garden, a place that was completely mine, where no one could tell me they were raising the rent or that I had to move out.
That dream became more urgent after the new owner of my building decided to renovate all the apartments. We were given 3 months to vacate or accept a rent increase of $300 a month. For me, that $300 was the difference between living with dignity and counting every penny to make it to the end of the month. It was then that I made the decision that would change everything. For 30 years, I had been secretly saving money, not just the money Kevin and Jessica knew I had in my savings account, but other money. Money I had saved coin by coin, bill by bill, hidden in places no one else knew about. Under the mattress was a plastic bag with $1 bills. In an old coffee can at the bottom of the closet, I kept all the extra cash from overtime. In the hem of my Sunday coat, the one I wore for special occasions, I had sewn $1,000 in $50 bills. When I counted it all, I had $60,000, a fortune for someone who earned $450 a week. Money that represented years of not buying myself new shoes, of cooking at home instead of ordering out, of walking instead of taking the bus when the weather allowed. Every bill had a story of sacrifice behind it. The day I decided to look for a house was a Tuesday morning. I had woken up with a strange determination. I got dressed in my best clothes, counted my money one more time, and went out to tour neighborhoods where houses were within my budget. The first house I saw was in a quiet neighborhood,
a 40-minute bus ride from the plant. It was small, a bungalow with 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a tiny kitchen, and a backyard the size of a dining room table. The exterior paint was peeling, the windows needed repair, and the front yard was more weeds than grass. But it had something that made me fall in love with it immediately. A large bay window in the master bedroom that faced east, perfect for watching the sunrise. The real estate agent, a young man in a sharp suit with a salesman's smile, looked me up and down when I said I was interested. "Ma'am, this property is listed for $65,000. Are you pre-approved for a mortgage?" "I don't need a loan. I can pay in cash." His expression changed completely. Suddenly, I was no longer an old woman wasting his time, but a serious client. He showed me every corner of the house, explaining its potential as if it were a palace. But I had already made up my mind from the moment I saw that window. For years, I had woken up in dark rooms. Here, I could have my morning coffee watching the day be born. That same afternoon, I made an offer of $55,000. The seller accepted immediately. The legal paperwork took 3 weeks. 3 weeks during which I told no one. Every night after getting home from the plant, I would sit and imagine what it would be like to live in my own house. The day I signed the final papers, my hands were shaking, not from nerves, but from excitement. At 65 years old, for the first time in my life, I was going to have something that was completely mine. The house was empty and smelled of dust, but it was mine. I walked through each room, slowly, touching the walls. In the master bedroom, I stood in front of that window I had loved so much and smiled for the first time in months. That night, I slept on the floor of my new house, wrapped in a blanket. I didn't have any furniture yet, but I had something better. I had the certainty that every inch of that place belonged to me. The problem started when I decided to tell Kevin and Jessica. I invited them to dinner the following Sunday. I cooked their favorite dish, a pot roast that took me 4 hours to prepare, and set the table with my nicest plates.
Kevin arrived in a bad mood. He had lost his job at the dealership the week before for being late repeatedly. Jessica arrived complaining about the traffic. I waited until after dessert to give them the news. "I have something important to tell you," I said, trying to sound casual but excited. Jessica sighed. "Oh, Eleanor, I hope you're not about to get sentimental. We have enough problems of our own." "No, it's not that. It's something good. I bought a house." The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "You bought a house?" Kevin finally asked. "A small house in the St. Vincent neighborhood. 2 bedrooms, a yard. It's perfect for me." Jessica straightened in her chair. "With what money? Where did you get $55,000? "I'd been saving for years," I explained. "Money from work, small amounts I'd been putting away." Jessica's expression changed from surprise to something I couldn't immediately identify. It was a mix of anger and disappointment, as if my independence were a personal betrayal to her. "Mom, why didn't you tell us anything?" Kevin asked. "We could have helped you find something better, a place in a safer neighborhood." "I didn't need help. I already found what I wanted." Jessica got it from the table abruptly. "This is unbelievable. We're over here struggling to pay rent, borrowing money for the kids' expenses, and you had thousands of dollars hidden away this whole time?" "They weren't hidden. They were saved." "It's the same thing," Jessica yelled. "Do you know how many times we've needed money? How many times we've had to borrow from you when you had a fortune stashed away?" Kevin tried to calm her down, but I could see in his eyes that he felt the same way. For them, my money had always been a resource available for their emergencies. The idea that I had my own goals, my own dreams, hadn't crossed their minds. "Besides," Jessica continued, "you're not so young anymore to live alone. What's going to happen if you get sick, if you fall, and there's no one to help you?" "I'm perfectly fine," I replied. I work a full-time job. I handle my own affairs. I don't need a babysitter. But Jessica had already found her argument. The seed she would plant that night would grow to become the justification for everything that would happen later. Eleanor, at this age you have to be practical. It would be much smarter if you sold that house and came to live with us. We could use the money to buy a bigger house where we all fit comfortably. There it was. Not 10 minutes had passed since they learned of my accomplishment, and they were already planning how to take advantage of it. Moving into my new house took 3 full weekends. My first few months there were the happiest I could remember. I woke up every morning with the sun streaming through my favorite window. I had planted flowers in the front yard, purple petunias and white daisies. I learned to fix things by watching internet tutorials at the public library. Kevin and Jessica visited twice during those first few months. Both times they arrived with a critical attitude that dampened my joy. "Mom, this neighborhood looks kind of rough," was the first thing Kevin said. Jessica walked through the house with a look of disgust. "This kitchen is way too small, and this bathroom needs a complete renovation. The tile looks so old." But the real pressure started when Kevin lost his second job in 6 months. The call came on a Tuesday night. He sounded desperate. "Mom, I got fired from work today. I have to pay rent next week and I don't have anything. Can you lend me the money for the rent? It's $900. I'll pay you back as soon as I find a job." $900, money I had sweated for weeks at work at the plant. "Kevin, I've already lent you a lot of money this year. You need to learn to manage your expenses." "Mom, please, it's an emergency. Do you want my children to be left on the street?" The emotional manipulation that always worked. But this time, sitting in my own house, something inside me rebelled. Your children are not going to be left on the street. You are going to find a way to solve your problem like the adult you are. The silence on the other end of the line was long. When Kevin spoke again, his voice was cold and calculating. "Okay, Mom, I get it. I see what your priorities are now. Ever since you bought that house, you've become selfish." The conversation ended with Kevin hanging up on me. 2 days later, they showed up at my house unannounced. It was Friday afternoon. "Surprise," Jessica said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We came to visit." They walked in without waiting for an invitation. "Well, Eleanor, since you didn't want to help us with the money, the landlord gave us 3 days to vacate the apartment, so we decided to come stay with you while we look for something cheaper." My heart stopped. "No, you can't stay here." Jessica sat on my couch as if she hadn't heard me. "Why not? You have 2 bedrooms, and we're family. It's the least you can do." "Because this is my house, and I decide who lives here." They left that night, but not before making one last observation that chilled me to the bone. "Eleanor, this house is too big for you alone. One of these days, you're going to need someone to take care of you, and I hope we have the heart to do it after how you're treating us." That night, I couldn't sleep. I knew they wouldn't give up easily. The first sign that something was terribly wrong was the sound of keys in my lock on a Saturday morning. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard the familiar metallic jingle. But it was impossible. I had the only keys to my house. I walked out of the kitchen and found Kevin standing in my living room, smiling as if he had every right in the world to be there. "Morning, Mom. How did you get in?" "Oh, that. Jessica had a copy of your keys made the last time we visited. She said it was for safety, in case something happened to you." I stood there, frozen. They had violated my privacy in the most fundamental way. "Give me those keys back, immediately." "Mom, don't get worked up. The keys are for your own safety. Jessica and I have been thinking, and we believe it's time we made some changes here." "What kind of changes?" "This house has a lot of potential, but it needs to be modernized. The guest bedroom could become a room for the kids, and your bedroom, well, it's too big for one person. You are not touching my bedroom." "Mom, Be reasonable. There are 4 of us and 1 of you. It's logical that the space should be distributed according to each family's needs. This conversation is over. Kevin, I want you to leave my house right now. I'm not leaving, Mom. Jessica and the kids are coming in an hour with some of our stuff. We've already decided that we're going to live here. I called the police, but Kevin was right. There wasn't much they could do. Ma'am, I understand your frustration, the officer explained, but your son has keys to the house and says you gave them permission to stay. This is considered a civil conflict, not a criminal one. When Jessica arrived with the kids and 3 large suitcases, my world collapsed. That first night, I slept with my bedroom door locked, a prisoner in my own home. On the second day, I came home from work to find they had moved all my living room furniture. On the third day, Jessica had completely reorganized my kitchen. On the fourth day, I found the painters in my bedroom. When I arrived and saw those men covering my warm peach walls with cold white paint, something inside me broke for good. "Mom, we decided this room is too big for you," Kevin explained. "This is going to be the master bedroom of the house. You can use the smaller bedroom, which is more appropriate for your needs." "You'll see what a beautiful change this is, Eleanor," Jessica said with a triumphant smile. "And we've already ordered new furniture, a whole bedroom set that's going to look amazing." "With what money did you buy furniture?" Kevin exchanged a glance with Jessica. "Well, since we all live here now, we thought it was logical to use part of your savings for improvements that benefit the whole family." My savings? They had found my money? Somehow, they had discovered where I kept my emergency reserves in the old coffee can. "How much did you take?" "Just $2,000 for the bedroom furniture and some improvements. Don't worry, it's an investment. When we sell the house, it's going to be worth much more." When we sell the house, no longer if. That night, after the humiliation, after discovering they had stolen my money, after seeing how they had turned my home into their personal project, I made a decision. I was not going to let this continue. I sat in what they had designated as my new room and took out my phone. First, I called Gus, the handyman, to ask for the name of the lawyer he had used when he bought his house. Then, I looked in the directory for the number of a locksmith who did 24-hour emergency service. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. They just didn't know who they were messing with. That night, I waited until the whole house was silent. At 5 a.m. sharp, an older man in a small truck arrived without making a sound. He was a friend of Gus's, someone trustworthy. "Ma'am," he said while he examined my locks, "this is more common than you'd think. Families taking advantage of their elders, thinking they won't fight back. You're doing the right thing." He worked quickly and quietly. He changed the front door lock, the lock on the garden gate, and even put a new deadbolt on the back door. He gave me 3 sets of new keys. When he left, I went to work as if it were a normal day. The moment came at 2 p.m. My phone started to ring. Kevin. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Jessica. I ignored that call, too. The text messages started flooding in. "Mom, why did you change the locks?" "Eleanor, this is ridiculous. Open the door." And finally, a message that made me smile for the first time in days. "The police said that since it's your house, you can change the locks whenever you want." Perfect. When I got home that afternoon, I found the whole family sitting on my front porch. "Mom, open that door immediately," Kevin yelled as soon as he saw me. "No." "What do you mean no? Our stuff is in there." "Your stuff shouldn't be there. I never gave you permission to move into my house." Just then, Gus arrived in his truck, just as we'd planned. His presence immediately changed the dynamic. a police car I had requested for a civil standby pulled up moments later. "Officer, thank you for coming," I said. "These people entered my home without permission. They had copies of my keys made, moved in, and started making changes to my property without my consent." The officer, who had seen it all before, sighed patiently. "Sir, the fact that she is your mother doesn't give you automatic rights to her property. If she is the legal owner and there is no rental agreement, she can decide who lives here." "But our stuff is inside," Jessica insisted. "They can collect their things under supervision," I told the officer. "I have no problem with that. I just don't want them living here anymore." And so, an hour later, I watched as they removed every last thing they had brought to take over my space. The new furniture they had bought with my money, the big television, the suitcases, everything. When they were done, Jessica looked at me with a mixture of hatred and desperation. "You're going to regret this, Eleanor. When you're old and alone, you're going to remember how you treated us." "I'm already old, Jessica, and I prefer to be alone than in bad company." Kevin made one last attempt. "Mom, are you really going to choose a house over your family?" "I'm not choosing a house over my family. I'm choosing my dignity over abuse." They left, but I knew it wasn't over. Their revenge would come in the morning. It did. At 6:30 a.m., loud authoritarian knocking hammered on my door. "Police, open the door, please." 2 different officers showed me a court order. "Mrs. Vance, we have a report that you are mentally unfit to live alone and are a danger to yourself. We're here to conduct a welfare check." Behind them stood Kevin and Jessica, their faces a mask of feigned concern. "Officer," Kevin said, his voice dripping with false sincerity, "my mom is confused. She asked us to live with her, but now she's forgotten. We're worried about her mental health." Jessica opened a folder. "Officer, here I have text messages where my mother-in-law begs us to come live with her." My blood ran cold. They had fabricated false evidence. "Officer," Kevin continued in a sad, worried voice, "my mom has been acting very strange lately. She forgets things. She says she didn't do things she did. We're worried she has early onset dementia." At that moment, my phone rang. It was Gus. "The lawyer is on his way." When attorney Michael Jenkins arrived, the entire dynamic shifted. He was a man in his 50s, professionally dressed, who immediately asked to see all the documents Jessica had presented. He examined the text messages with a small magnifying glass he took from his briefcase. After several minutes, he looked up with a small smile. "These messages are forged. You can clearly see it in the metadata. They were created using an app to generate fake conversations. Furthermore, officer, presenting false evidence to the authorities is a felony." Jessica immediately turned pale. Attorney Jenkins addressed Kevin directly. In a firm voice, "Young man, your mother is a competent adult who has the right to make her own decisions about where and how to live. The fact that you don't like those decisions doesn't give you the right to fabricate false evidence or invade her property." The lead officer closed his notebook and addressed Kevin and Jessica. "Based on what I've seen here, you have no legal grounds. The text messages are forged, there is no valid rental agreement, and Mrs. Vance is clearly competent to make her own decisions. If you continue to harass Mrs. Vance, you will face charges. Is that clear?" They left my house that morning, defeated and humiliated. But before he left, Kevin looked at me with a coldness I had never seen in his eyes. "Mom, you won this battle, but you're all alone now, completely alone." His words were designed to hurt me, to make me feel guilty for choosing my dignity over their manipulation. But for the first time in my life, loneliness didn't scare me. "I'm not alone, Kevin. I have true friends, a job that gives me purpose, and a house that is completely mine. I have my self-respect, which I almost lost trying to please you two." That afternoon, when I got home from work, I found my house exactly as I had left it, in silence, at peace, completely mine.
I sat in my garden with a cup of coffee, looking at the flowers I had planted with my own hands, breathing the air of my own space. For the first time in months, I wasn't afraid. I learned something important in these months of battle. Sometimes choosing your own happiness means disappointing the people you love. Sometimes defending your dignity means cutting ties with family who see you as a resource rather than a person. And sometimes chosen loneliness is better than toxic company. I still work at the plant. I still tend to my garden. I still live in my small but perfect house. Kevin and Jessica have not contacted me again, and that's okay. Maybe someday, when they learn to respect me as the independent person I am, we can rebuild a relationship. But it will be on my terms, not theirs. In the meantime, I'm 67 years old. I have my own home, true friends, and the peace that comes from knowing that no one can take away what I worked so hard to get. Sometimes silence is the most powerful justice of all. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.